to the Holy Hardwood podcast with Pat and Tony, where your New Orleans Pelicans pick up win number 5 with a 131-110 victory over the Dallas Mavericks. Brandon Ingram, 25 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals. Jordan Hawkins, 25 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on 5 of 12 from 3. Herb Jones, 19 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 5 steals. Zion Williamson, 19 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. Najee Marshall, 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Dyson Daniels, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals. Jonas Valanciunas, 6 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Just want to welcome in Pat to the podcast. This one was a fun one. Really looked like the guys were, having a lot of fun out there with all the defensive stops and getting out and transition and running, hitting threes, and finally looking like a team that's wanting to succeed and go from there. But I thought it was a really good sign tonight, from that defensive end.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think there's something that we need to touch on and get an answer to. What did you have a harder time looking at last night? The Pelicans home court or Luka's mustache?
Oh, Pat, that's very, very tough. I mean, the court was a sight to see, but also was Luka's mustache. He shaved it really, really thin with the beard, and then that stash was there. So I don't know if that was the reason for the early turnovers for Luka, or it was the court, kind of messing with his vision. Uh, but I am sure glad that we came out on top for this one.
Yeah, I mean, Luka looked like for some reason he had a flashback to the mid '80s and channeled his, inner Larry Bird there with that mustache. But maybe he got lost in transit trying to make it back to 2023 because certainly he did not have it going tonight, and I think a lot of that stems from some tenacious defense started up front by both Herb and Dyson. So um, having both those guys in the lineup, especially together to start the game, certainly gave the Pelicans a unique wrinkle that took a lot of pressure off those other guys in the starting lineup. So that was certainly a sight to see.
Yeah, I just want to touch on you bringing forth that new lineup, new starting lineup with Herb Jones getting back in the lineup coming off of injury. Some will say that lineup doesn't have a lot of spacing nor shooting, but I do really like how it does give you at least two main defenders in that group where maybe with that they can kind of cover up the other three. But um, touching on a couple of those guys, I really thought Brandon used his length, for his advantage defensively. I thought he was sitting down in that chair, but it ultimately led with Dyson and Herb, and like we always say, Herb Jones needs to be on one of all these defensive teams and in the defensive player of the year discussion for sure.
Yeah, both those guys are elite level defenders. We've been saying that for her or for Herb for some time now. But Dyson's also, since coming into the league is, really hit the ground running, as Joel would say, is way ahead of the curve in terms of, um, you know, the things he brings to the floor defensively. So, like you said, yeah, it was nice to have those two guys out there to one cover up some weaknesses, but I also think there was probably a little bit of, Zion and Brandon were watching those guys defend, at the point of attack, and that probably motivates them to play defense a little harder. You touched on Brandon. Usually, the best version of Brandon defensively would probably fall under the category of being an average defender. But last night certainly I think he excelled defensively. I think probably you could count on one hand maybe games in his career that he's looked better defensively. So certainly ranked really high up there, and I thought he was super active on the defensive end. And I have a hard time believing that it didn't have something to do with the fact that he had those two other primary defenders in the lineup that he could kind of work off of and see how hard they were working, and it pushed him to be also locked in on the defensive end.
No doubt about it. And, like I've always said, I think the best version of this team is when they can get those stops and when they can get out in transition, just because they are so tough. Uh, Being guarded in transition, you saw that with the 46 or 48 fast break points last night, which I think is a record for them. But, I think that ultimately just fueled them and, got them really passing the ball as well with all the assists they had with 33. So all in all, just really good sights to see from the game against the Mavericks here.
Yeah, it was a good night, and I think the transition points were certainly a big part of it, and tells a pretty well written story in terms of how they were successful and were able to come out on top against a team like the Mavericks. The way that Dallas plays, they shoot a lot of perimeter jump shots. They shoot a lot of shots early in the clock, having to do with Luka and Kyrie. So nights that you're locked in against them, and you do a good job of contesting some of those threes, that leads to a lot of long rebounds and opportunities to get out and go and generate a lot of offensive, baskets in the transition, which certainly, um, you know, helps anybody's game, but certainly a guy like Zion, being able to get him out and, have him get 6 to 8 easy ones a night, getting in transition, whether it's catching lobs or him running the break himself. So certainly a recipe that they can aim for in terms of bringing it defensively and playing with that level of intensity. But it'll be different night to night depending on who they're playing against and what that team's playing style is on a given night.
Yeah, just from my perspective as well, I really thought everyone who came off the bench last night did bring that energy on both ends. You saw a guy like Jordan Hawkins doing his thing, making a lot of shots, and Bi Zion finding him there, and Najee Marshall, second game back, he comes in, brings that kind of jolt of energy, kind of like Jose does. So it was really good to see Najee pour in 16 points, but I just like the activity and the energy that he was bringing.
Yeah, Najee's been really good since he's came back. At least playing with a really high motor. Um, he's brought a lot of those intangible things in terms of effort and energy, and a little bit of that. He's got a little bit of Dylan Brooks in him, right? Not the same level of um, peskiness that Dylan certainly has, but he is a dog defensively. You can tell that he likes to get into the head and get into the body of a lot of those other opposing top level players that we play against. So certainly it's been a big addition to get him back. But looking at that bench unit, especially with the continued emergence of Hawk, who's just I think at this point really blowing any of the expectations anybody had for him for this year really out of the water, and not only looking like a guy that is going to be a really good player surrounding Brandon and Zion in terms of being a catch and shoot guy, but I mean, there's just so many levels to his game, and I think ultimately, he looks like he's going to be a higher level prospect than a lot of people thought, and one day I think you could see him being a really effective high level scorer at a multitude of levels. That certainly just gives this team another wrinkle, and one thing for me that I've started to think about and look ahead to is assuming that this team is right around the corner here in a number of weeks. Hopefully just after Thanksgiving from essentially being returning to full health. Is I just don't know how you get all of these guys minutes. I mean, I think obviously we've seen players like Kyra who's fallen out of the rotation at this point. Um, I think that's just going to continue. I think there's just not enough minutes for, um, these rotation guys. The front office has done a really good job of putting around some, role players that have very specific skills, but they fit very well with what this team needed. And really, when you start looking at what's on that bench, they've got two or three really high end blue chip prospects there, in the bench rotations that are going to need a heavy dose of minutes, being obviously Trey and now Hawk. But I think at this point, all things considered, I think you got to throw Dyson in there, right? I think his versatility, his size, his ability to kind of play that combo guard at times, he's done a good job of um, running the offense. And there's been times where it looks like he's been running it from the point guard position that we've been really effective, and he's been doing a good job of getting us in and out of sets quickly and getting to the right spots. So I mean, assuming you return back to your normal starting lineup when CJ returns, I mean, there's three guys right there that I think at a bare minimum are going to have to get 20 minutes a night, if not more, when looking at Trey. So it just I have a hard time seeing who else cracks that rotation, assuming that your big three is going to play between 30 to 32 minutes a night. I don't have it in front of me what Herb's currently averaging per game, but I would imagine he's right around 30 a night. So there's just not a whole lot of minutes. So especially the return of someone like Jose, who obviously brings a good wrinkle in terms of his energy and his defense, but I think a lot of his minutes are also going to go to Hawk, right? I mean, it's just I don't know. That could just be me, but I think you're going to have a really hard time getting some of these guys in the rotation, which is certainly a good thing, a good problem to have, right? If you do run into more injuries down the road, but I think there's going to be some difficult decisions that need to be made because those three guys are just so versatile and have such specific skill sets that fit so well around those three main offensive players that you're going to have a really hard time not having those guys on the floor a large majority of the time next to those three.
I couldn't agree more with uh, all those points that you brought up. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, that's with the full, healthy unit and the regular starting five out there. You're looking at 11 or 12 deep. So it is the question of who is getting bumped out of here, because I think Hawkins is fully, you know, been deserving of keeping a spot here when Trey and Jose come back, and rightfully so. He's played really, really well. I don't think Trey's going to lose his spot. It might take him a little bit to get back into his groove from last year, but you're really looking at like Dyson, Matt Ryan, Najee, and maybe one
I
other
mean,
person.
yeah, realistically, I mean, I think this team at their best probably is a 9-man rotation the way that I see it. I mean, and you got to remember too, right? There's going to be some internal pressure in terms of giving guys like Dyson and Hawk those minutes over a guy like Jose, just in terms of where they were drafted and the investment that they've put into those guys, right? Like even if they were playing at an equal level, you would imagine that they're going to have more of a nod to get that playing time just because of that. But that's outside of the fact that I think both of them are playing at a super high level and are really, really contributing. So to me, I think it's those three guys, and then you got to somehow find a way to supplement some form of you know, a bigger body in there, whether that's, you know, Larry when he's healthy. Robinson Earl has been a nice surprise in terms of, he at least plays with a high motor. He's shown in a small sample size ability to stretch the floor. I mean, I don't see them really, if all things are clicking and they're healthy totally, I don't see them really going deeper than 9 because of the skill sets that they have. You'd imagine they're going to have at least bare minimum always one of the big three on the floor, if not two, at one time, and possibly JV out there or Herb. Well, then really the only thing left to do is throw those three out there because they slot so nicely at the 2, 3, and 4, or the one, 1, 3, and 4. They fit nicely around whichever of the three guys are out there. That it almost feels like it's always going to be them out there, or it's going to be that starting lineup. I don't see a whole lot of lineups out there that you're having to look for a guy like Jose to get many minutes because to me, I'd always rather, although Hawk isn't a primary ball handler, if CJ's out there, obviously CJ's going to have the ball. You would think that Brandon's going to have the ball in his hands a lot of the time, but obviously having a guy like Hawk next to Brandon certainly is more advantageous than a guy like Jose, in my opinion. So, um, I think there's certainly quite a few guys that are meeting the criteria for falling out of that rotation, and maybe they're bunched together to hopefully find one other piece to really round out that bench unit because um, at least two of those three guys, in my opinion, so far they look like they have a way higher ceiling than just being a typical 7 through 9 role player, right? Like you want to get those guys reps, right? They have it looks like a skill set and ability to certainly be really high level contributors. So I think you really got to push all those chips, to the front of the table and allow them that opportunity to grow next to, the big three that's currently in place.
Yeah, fully healthy, you're looking at about 12 guys who are vying for, like you said, 8 or 9 spots. So it becomes the question of all these guys bring certain, skill sets or different things to the table. And then, like, at the end of the day, you just got to be like, hey, like you said, maybe down the road, if we have more injuries, yeah, it's perfect to have these guys back there. But you're going to be needing to get minutes to those guys. So, I mean, it's definitely a good thing to have, but obviously, I wouldn't want to be that person making those decisions, um, because you would think it's just the starting five. You go Trey, Hawk, Dyson, and then, like you're saying, at that point, you kind of need some form of a big. And if that's Larry or Robinson Earl, it kind of gets to the point where, Matt Ryan, even though he's a really great shooter, is probably falling out of the rotation. Najee Marshall, who's a great energy guy, defender as well, he's probably out of the rotation. So it just becomes a numbers game at that point on, what you need and what you feel comfortable going with these guys. And it's that kind of old analogy. When you're hurt and someone kind of gets your spot, you never want to get hurt because there's always the chance of someone stealing that spot. And I think that's, happened to maybe a couple guys here with the surgence of Jordan Hawkins and Dyson really taking advantage of, Trey, Jose, and, CJ being out a little bit. So they've been able to show a little more of their game. And I think it's really benefited those two guys the most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Maybe down the line, you look back at this 10 game stretch and you're not thankful for the injuries, but you see it as a positive because it just expedited the growth of guys like Dyson and Hawk. So, that's certainly one way to look at it. Is kind of had to go through this to fully see what they had there, but now that you see what it is, I think you got to lean all the way into it. Especially a guy like Hawkins and Trey. Those are going to be two really, really high level young players with, amazing ascending skill sets for the modern game that, you know, even being role players, I would be tempted to get them close to 28, 30 minutes a night just because of the impact that they have, not only by themselves, but the impact that their skill sets play in terms of getting the most out of those other three guys. So, like you said, it's a good problem to have, but there's going to have to be some guys that have to swallow a difficult pill for the time being and have to maintain their professionalism and be ready to go because you know how it is. There's injuries around every corner, but um, the closer and closer we get to it, really, really excited, especially coming off of last night and the way that they were playing, and really just excited to see this group back together with the addition of Trey and essentially CJ. But most importantly to me, I'm thinking about how Trey and Hawk really just changed the dynamic um, for Brandon and Zion, and then obviously still thinking about a guy like CJ, but um, those skill sets are just so difficult to cover from a defensive aspect for other teams that this will be something that we really haven't seen for the 4 or 5 year tenure. So certainly can't get those guys back soon enough. Hopefully, just following Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, all great points. I mean, Brandon says it a lot. You can't guard all of us. When healthy and you're on that break and you have Jordan Hawkins on the left wing running in space and hopefully Trey on the right wing, and you have any combination of Brandon, Zion, or CJ, it's going to be pretty difficult to be guarding every single person out there, especially with their shooting abilities. But I just wanted to ask, did you think this team looked a little different last night, a little more, hop to their step? What would do you think maybe credited that? And was it just, maybe off of an embarrassing loss coming out and playing harder?
I mean, I think there was certainly some of it. I mean, it's hard not to imagine that if you take a loss like that at home, that you're not going to respond and play with energy. But we've seen other games this year also where we've taken some bad losses, and it didn't look like that. I think it was almost the perfect storm, right? You're coming off of a tough loss, but not only that, you're playing the same team that you lost to. So there's obviously some extra fuel to that fire. You're playing in front of your home crowd in one of your tournament games, and on one of those new floors. So I think that added some energy to it. And then, I mean, I think it's not to say that there's some issue internally where there's a massive issue with the coaching dynamic, but I mean it certainly seemed like the way you saw them react to JB's coaching, that they took it in stride and they reacted well to it, and it certainly um, follows suit what I've heard regarding JB as a coach. You actually heard it, I believe, in a segment last night's game that they were talking about how Jason Kidd was talking about JB being one of the most impressive offensive minds that he's coached against, and the way that he pushes his guys and motivates his guys. I mean, that's what I saw. I saw a new level of offense and a group that looked motivated and ready to go. To the fact that, to me, what I saw, right, with especially with like a guy like Brandon, is you almost saw that he knew JB was going to put him in a position to maximize his game and his abilities last night, and was going to allow him to play with pace and make a lot of decisions and push tempo and really get his teammates involved. And you came out and you saw a guy, Brandon, really being bought in and being really really active, and it seemed like there was a lot of cohesiveness there, just as a group. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to just solely say yeah it's because Willie was out, but I think there is something about having a fresh voice and a fresh face that is telling you something slightly different, or motivating you in a slightly different way. And I think it was certainly a positive thing, and something that we'll have to monitor as we go, because pretty much everything that JB was mocked up to essentially bring when we were looking at him before the season, we kind of saw it on full display last night, and it's hard to argue that it looked really really good. So um, you know, obviously we hope that we don't have too many situations like that, that Willie isn't forced to remove himself from the sideline due to an illness or anything like that. But we need to find a way to, um, mend the best version and characteristics that JB has a coach with what Willie's really good at too, right? And I think that's something that those two need to work on, and figure out a way to maximize both of their abilities, because I was really impressed with what I saw.
Yeah, just to speak on that point, I just saw Borrego really, really engaged throughout the whole game. Willie's one of the coaches that he'll sit down a little bit, but he will also stand up. But I really felt kind of that vibe from JB. He was up, he was moving around, he was, talking to the refs when he may have thought that we deserved a call or something like that. It just seemed like he was very intentional last night, and the whole team came out with a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word you're looking for is he was just engaged. He was very engaged with what was happening on the floor. Um, there also wasn't a lot of time where we would get the ball out of the basket and we would just kind of walk it up and just kind of go into our typical stuff. Like, you saw him calling out a lot of actions and different sets and things almost on a possession to possession basis. And you would see a guy like either Dyson or Brandon looking over there to get the call, and they were getting into things quicker, and they were being assertive with it, right? Um, there was also a really good ATO that he drew up, that it was probably the first ATO I've seen this year that looked like, you know we came out with an intention, like there was a purpose behind the ATO, rather than just, oh, we're going to do this and whatever comes out of it. Like, there was a very specific action and a very specific look that we were trying to get, and we were able to get it, and Brandon did a good job of finding his teammates there. But just small stuff like that, as you work through a game, it just adds up, and it just allows you to just be more effective on the offensive end, and generate cleaner looks. And it doesn't allow guys to kind of become passive, and potentially fall back into bad habits. So I was really excited to see how something like that did benefit BI. I think that was by far the best game of the year from Brandon. He was playing at a different pace. He was playing at a different level. And like you had mentioned to me earlier, 18 potential assists. That's not an accident, right? That's all coming from that offensive pace that they were playing with, and the looks that they were able to generate for other guys. So I was really impressed with it.
As was I. I mean, by far, just the most activity on the defensive end from our group of guys, and it just seems like they were really, really in tune with everything they were doing last night. And not all nights are going to be like that, and you just hope that there can be some carryover from this game to hopefully build on those things going into game in and game out, especially Friday with the Nuggets coming into town and all that. So hopefully this is just a small step that can game in and game out get them the confidence to say, hey, this system works. If we all just believe and trust in each other on that defensive end, you can see what we can do offensively.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, JB gave him the blueprint, right? He gave him the perfect game to see exactly what it looks like, but now it's on them to be professionals, and now they have to do the work, right? They have to see, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what we're capable of doing when we do things the right way and the way that we're being coached to do them. So the hard part is can you stay locked in enough to do it night in and night out? So that'll be a big test for the group, but hopeful that maybe they don't hit the same level of shots, and maybe things aren't everything's not falling, and it's one of those nights. But if you can just see that, like you said, they're locked in and bought in, and they have a purpose offensively. They look more crisp, right? They just look like they had more direction and had more confidence in what they were actually trying to do. So those are two of the things I'm looking for, that, like you said, the being engaged defensively, as well as not just sleepwalking on the offensive end and just kind of going through the motions. Continue playing with that assertiveness, and if you do that, you're going to generate a lot of good looks for a lot of different players. So, um, really looking forward to it just from that aspect alone.
No doubt about it, Pat. And like I said, the Nuggets are coming into town on Friday. Another big in-season tournament game with a lot of implications. I don't know if you've looked at the standings, but uh, we win this game, it gets us into first place with the differential in the point system there. So a big one at home for sure, and we definitely own one for the previous game in the earlier on in the season.
Yeah, I think everything again just kind of lines up to be a really big moment, for as big of a moment it can be, right? 12 games into the year, obviously this new tournament system, but I think it's a good opportunity to show that they're able to kind of take advantage of the opportunity that's ahead of them, and they got to come out and they got to deliver, right? Another game on their home floor with implications in place, so it's on them to do the little things and play the right way, and hopefully if they do that, they can go ahead and take care of business and really kind of put themselves in the driver's seat looking forward for the rest of this tournament. And obviously, all of those experiences certainly can benefit a young group that hasn't had a lot of experiences like that. So, your hope is you can take care of business, you put yourself in a position to advance into the tournament, and maybe you can really get some meaningful games here in the midseason that can really expedite the learning curve this group has in playing in big games, and can kind of work through the kinks so that you look hopefully towards the end of the year. If you've had a successful year, you're in a position to be playing some playoff basketball, and you can really look back to some of these moments throughout the year as things that really got you headed in the right direction.
For sure. And, I think this team really needed a game against this Mavericks team to kind of get them some more confidence and to truly show them that it does work. So hopefully, like I said, they can uh, continue this for Friday's game, and they're on a back to back with, I believe, Minnesota on Saturday. So, two big games at home coming up this weekend, and hopefully we can just continue, keep getting better.
Yeah, for sure. Great opportunity. Looking forward to it for sure. I know all of our fans are looking forward to it. Um, speaking of our fans, I know you and I have got something planned, another show as we got some off days here. Obviously, we're going to change it up and maybe do a little bit of some different analysis and maybe some some deep dives and some roster moves as there's been a lot of talk around the team lately. Hopefully, all of that is hopefully quieted here, right, as they continue to trend in the right direction. But I think it's good to let everybody know, all of our listeners, that we've got something planned and we're excited to share it with you, and that'll be coming here shortly. So,
Yeah, excited for that and to be talking over some things there. But again, your New Orleans Pelicans get the victory over the Dallas Mavericks, 131 to 110, in the in-season tournament game, and looking forward to Friday.
yes, sir. Looking forward to it.